Hello, I'm Herm Gailey. We're here to put up another video and to announce that we have now reached our 1-year anniversary. We currently have more than 50 videos posted. What we're going to do today is in response to a request or a question from one of the viewers. Comments, questions are always welcome. We always try to respond. And if there is another video needed to explain our answer to a question, we will do it. So that's what we're doing this time. Give some thought to subscribing. I'm not much of a salesman. I've been reminded that you always should say subscribe, hit the like button, and ask for notifications, and we can give you those things. Why not? It doesn't cost you a penny, and you might find something that you like. What we're going to talk about today is in response to a question following a video where I asked a lot of questions and asked for comments. And one of the questions was, we see what you're doing with your hands, what's going on with your legs? Rather than going back to the previous video and explaining that, I realized that it really makes sense to make a separate video on the use of the leg aids. In my view, the proper use of your legs is one of the 3 basic elements of horsemanship. Those being go forward, give to the bridle, and move off your legs, either directionally or forward. So let's get on with it. We're going to talk a little bit about the use of the legs and also a little bit about the anatomy of the leg aids. So the first thing we're going to look at is the legs used for forward motion. We want to generate forward motion. So I'm going to come across here and I'm going to lightly put my legs on him as if I expect this to work really well. And he steps right up. In fact, he's, if anything, a little over enthusiastic, which I don't fault him for. Full disclosure, I did wake him up just a little bit before we did the video, and that shows. So you just gently put your leg into him. And that's more the response I would like to have. Now let's suppose you didn't get that response. That doesn't mean it was a mistake to ask gently. Always ask as if you expect it to be perfect, because what if it is? And the only way you'll ever get to something close to perfection in that aid is if you start out as soft as possible. But if he doesn't go, then you ask, he didn't go, bump, you send it. A reasonable rate is whether you do that in increments, like bump a little harder, a little harder, a little harder, or take your legs away and bump hard. On a green horse, that incremental approach is good. It lets you find out what their threshold is. With a finished horse who is just a little lazy, you're sending a wake-up call so you can and should be more aggressive. So that's the first of the uses of your legs. The second, of course, is to use your legs to influence direction and body movement. So if you shape your horse with your hands, let's suppose what I do is this. I've got him walking around in a short circle in a bent position. If I want to yield his hindquarters to the outside, I shift my leg back behind the cinch, apply it, and he should rotate like that. On that particular maneuver, my own preference is to not lock the front end down. That tends to lead to a horse blocking you with his shoulder. I'm okay with them at least picking their feet up and down in the front, as opposed to just locking down and setting a pivot foot. So that's what you do when you want to influence the hip, is you put the leg back. So you have different parts of the horse's body that you're going to use for different responses. And if you reverse that and you say, let's move the shoulder, then you get something more like this. And with both of those maneuvers, you may have noticed I didn't have to dig and I didn't have to beg. I asked him nicely, he responded nicely, which is pleasing. If he hadn't gone, I would have gotten more aggressive to remind him. Or with the green horse, you have to say, okay, do I need to teach him better before I ask him? Or do I just need to ask a little harder because he's not paying attention? That's a judgment call. There's a lot of feel involved in this whole process. Let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of our leg aids. It begins at your heel. That is the crudest of your leg aids. If you really need to wake a horse up, you can take your legs away and bump them with your heels, or if they're really resistant, you can put a spur into them. You will notice in all of the videos, except maybe if I'm riding a 2-year-old, I'm going to be wearing spurs. But you can watch quite a lot of video before you see me ever touch a horse with a spur. My goal is to have them, but not need them. And when I do need them, then I'll apply them, and then it's over for a while. A horse that is really sluggish, you're going to drive with your heels. You're going to take your legs away and bump them. Now that doesn't mean that you take your legs way up by your ears, slam down just to find out what's going to happen. Ask your horse nicely, then go to a more direct, more aggressive aid if you need to. Your calves are a real important area of influence. They're much more subtle than your heel, and I find I use my calves a lot. I'll use right around my boot top, I'll put pressure on, and there you can see he's just picking up the walk here, which is what I'm asking for, is a little more energetic walk. So that's the calves. Then we move up, you can use your thighs, but I find that the next area that really makes a difference is your seat, where you are with regard to your seat. If you sit up a little taller, shift your your seat forward just a little bit, you're probably going to find that that helps move your horse ahead. Conversely, if you want to slow down, I'll roll my seat underneath and the horse will slow down. I'm not using my hand there, that's off my seat. If you want to stop, you should be able to roll your seat and stop off your seat. And you can accentuate that by shifting your legs further forward when you do that. You'll get a more defined response. So that is a much more subtle aid. It takes a horse a while to learn how to respond off your seat. So you can get a green horse learning to move off your heel, off your calves pretty quickly. To build that responsiveness to your seat into your horse is going to take longer. Your seat also comes into play when you're backing up. I'll roll my seat down in almost the position that I use when almost in the position I would be in when I stop, and then I'll take a hold with my hands and ask the horse to go backwards. But I'll do that again and ask our camera lady to focus in on my hands a little. The fact is, you don't want to be overusing your hands in the backup or any other maneuver, or you strangle your forward motion. Just shape it. So I'm going to roll my seat, take the slack out of the reins, and not do much with my hands. So that's not threatening to him. Now, if he didn't go, I would go to my cruder aids. I might take my legs away, bump him in the belly. Relatively rarely, I might shift my legs forward and bump him in the forearm. That's easy to overdo, but those are two ways to spark your horse up using those cruder aids, those more elementary aids. But what you really want is to be able to use your seat to stop and then to go into a backup. So those are a number of ways that you can use your legs to influence your horse. Your legs are actually a more versatile aid than your hands. Your hands can do two things. They can retard motion, they can restrain your horse, or they can shape your motion. Your legs can send your horse forward and do almost limitless things in terms of shaping that motion and directing it. So if I want to take this horse and use some left leg right around the cinch, a little bit in front, that means move your shoulders. So whoa. So there you have a direction set by your hand, a shape set by your hand, and you send him after it with your legs. Now, let's suppose we use the same left leg and we say, I want you to move your hip. I'll move my leg back and take the horse and move him around. It's all a matter of positioning. He would never know that from my hands. It's the legs that make the difference. So use your legs intermittently. Don't hug your horse constantly with your legs, or you're just making your own best tool dull. So if you're loping your horse around, say, and you want to steer him, I'll just take him out here on a bit of a circle. So if I want to go forward, I'm going to kick. I'm not going to hug him with my legs. I'm going to bump one time and sit up and increase his speed a bit. If I want to steer him in, I'm going to move my hands over ever so slightly, move my leg into him, and then release it. Move my hands over, move my leg ever so slightly, and then release him. But what I'm not doing is prying his face over there and just pushing him with my legs. I'm bumping him off my leg and sending him a direction. So don't dull your best tool. And then just to sort of take that stop off your seat a little further, I'll just release myself. And he stops. If you look at my hands in that sequence, I don't think I really got a hold of him. I just balanced him. So those are some thoughts on the use of your legs. Remember, the heels, the spur, much more crude, much more of a coercive aid to use, which may be necessary, or instructional on a horse that doesn't know or who is fallen off the wagon and isn't paying attention. As you work your way further up your legs to your seat, it becomes progressively more subtle and harder to detect. What was sort of gratifying was that the person who asked the question had obviously carefully watched the video I had done, but had no idea what I was doing with my legs. That is a form of compliment, because the less apparent your leg aids are, the better they're working. So that made me feel good, but it also made me realize that some explanation was in order. Here it is. Thank you.